and welcome. This is the Kestrel Country Podcast, where we discuss the people, places, and events all around Kestrel Country. Well, we are coming to you from our living room once again on this snowy Saturday. It'll be probably a Monday a couple weeks from now when this episode comes out, but we are getting absolutely hammered with this Palouse snow. So I'm your host, Mike Church, and joined by my co-host and lovely wife, once again, Catherine.
Hello, hello.
So yeah, we're just getting launched on this second episode. Trying to still figure this thing out, but I think, what are we talking about? That we need to be a little more conversational, maybe.
Yes, just talking.
So what's going on today?
Well, it's a Saturday. And so life on the farm involves a lot of snow plowing when we have a day like today, which was already happening this morning.
Yeah, so we talked about today, talking to you all about kind of rural living. One of the things on the real estate side that we do a lot is help people out looking for real property. Yeah, and so we thought it'd be helpful just to talk about some of the pros and cons of rural living, some of our experiences living out here. So I guess we should probably talk first about where we do live.
We live outside of town, about 4 point something, how many miles?
Yeah,
outside
just
of town.
4 miles northeast of Moscow.
Which I was really hesitant about because I grew up in Moscow. And Moscow is a small town, and so the idea of moving outside of town, even though it's 4 miles, and I know that's ridiculous, was a big deal. And so when we were looking at this place, I would drive a couple times out here just to test it and see how the drive was. And that might include a crying kid in the backseat, but just to see how's the commute.
And what do you think of it so far?
Well, now it's not a bad plan at all. It's no big deal
to
drive 10 to 15 minutes to get to school with the kids,
Well, I think for you, like you said, you grew up, it's funny to me because I felt like you grew up in small town North Idaho, you would probably just be all about it. Whereas I grew up in Michigan. And so, but I did grow up kind of in the country in Michigan.
You did.
I mean, I was in a suburban area, but we had a few acres and had acres and acres of woods behind our house. So I grew up kind of with that kind of quiet distance between neighbors kind of country living. It was just funny to me that you weren't really excited about it. But we were able to find this place that
we weren't looking at that time either. I mean, we knew we wanted to move outside of town, ideally.
Yeah, it's true. Well, because we sold our house in town. We were living in town on Panorama Drive.
Yeah.
Big house, really too big for us. And so we sold it in order to have kind of less house and more land, which is what we ended up with. But one of the things I think that helped sell you on this place was that we're on a paved road.
Yes, definitely.
Which is kind of rare to be out in the country and on a paved road. Funny story about that, actually. I don't know if I think you know the story, but I was talking to one of our neighbors here, and soon after we bought the place, and I was saying, oh yeah, it's so great, we love that it's on a paved road. We're outside town, everything is still on a paved road. And he said, yeah, well, you know why that is? No. And he said, well, he was friends with the county commissioner at the time years ago, and they had some extra money in their budget for paving. And he said, hey, do you want, paved out to your house? I said, yeah, absolutely. So like just out past his house, just a little ways past our house where the paving ends, but basically just up north of Robinson County Park, which is a popular Latah County park here, is where we live now.
Yeah. But so the drive was one thing, and now that might not be an issue for other people. But
and that was one of your biggest concerns, wasn't it?
Honestly, I don't think I really considered the other elements. Well, like just the elements themselves actually being involved in living outside of town. I really hadn't considered some of those things that you have to take care of, or what life on a well would mean, or septic system, or power, or all of those things. Internet, how hard is it to get internet where you are? So I don't think that had really crossed my mind as much, honestly, as the commute.
Yeah.
Which is.
But then once you got used to the commute, I don't know if you still feel this way now, our kids are a little older now, we have more and more activities, but I really personally, I love the commute. It's not, when we say commute, I mean, it's 15 minutes at the most to wherever we're going. About 10 minutes into town, 5 minutes from there, you know.
But to be fair, once you've lived in Moscow, you start getting the Moscow perspective on understanding what a Moscow commute is like. So if you're going to make a Walmart run to that side of town, you might want to group your things. And this is hilarious to other people. Or if you're going to Pullman,
coming from somewhere else, like outside of this area, I know for me, again, growing up in Michigan where there's a lot of traffic and, you know, again, we live kind of out in the edge of suburbs, it was like no big deal to drive a half an hour someplace. You know, we drove a half an hour a lot of times to school or to work or that kind of thing. And so it's hilarious to me, but then it's so quickly
you adjust.
You get used to that and you're just like, if you can't be someplace in 3 minutes, you're like, oh my goodness.
You have to plan for it.
That to put our commute in context, it's not a long commute, but yet I really, for me, going in and out of work or bringing the kids to school and that kind of thing, I really love the bit of decompression time.
Well, not
especially because our commute is not through traffic, right? Like a lot of people's in other areas are. So our commute is through the beautiful rolling hills of the Palouse, and you get to actually kind of see the sky, enjoy it, you know, see what we talked about before, seeing kestrels, but other birds and wildlife on the drive in. It just kind of gives that little bit of perspective, a little bit of distance between kind of like coming off of work or heading in and some time to think or talk to the kids. I know the people we bought this place from, the Pauls, they raised all their kids out here, and they said that was one thing they really valued was you're not just kind of constantly go, go, go. You have some time in the car to talk to your kids after school, before school, and or, you know, listen to a podcast.
Or audiobooks.
Or audiobooks or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of a nice thing. It's not too long, but so anyway, the drive, that was a big hurdle.
My number one concern was the drive. And then
what were the mitigating positives? Because obviously, I know I had to convince you to move out here, but what were the positives that you were looking forward to?
Well, I think it's
with the move.
This space was really fun. When we came and visited with the kids, when we were looking at it, you know, they were loving that already. And that was just really evident. They were running around and looking at the property, and that was really fun. But I think the other factor was that I love flowers and I love gardening, and of course I was doing floral design for years. And so we wanted to expand that direction, and I've always loved plants and stuff. So being able to have all the space for a garden was really exciting. Fruit trees, all of that. So that was a huge plus factor.
Yeah. Well, and that was, for me, I think some of the biggest plus factors, I shared the same thing, you know, same pluses there. But also I was excited about some of the peace and quiet, you know, having grown up more like that. I really like the dark, starry skies at night, the real quiet, a little bit of distance and space and some privacy, you know. It's not that there's anything wrong with being in town, but where we lived on Panorama, for example, just not a lot of big trees or anything. Landscape, you know, it was a newer subdivision, so everything felt very kind of exposed.
More fishbowl.
And where I was used to some distance there, it was just kind of really, I was looking forward to that. And then my parents live up by Moscow Mountain, just around the corner from us. So it was fun we at least had some family really close by. And then we're only 7 minutes or something from your parents.
We have a lot of neighbors here too. They are just a little bit, you know, I don't know what the closest neighbor is, but they're not that far away.
Yeah, definitely. So it is kind of a nice, I mean, we feel like we hit the jackpot, kind of a nice balance of being close to town, yet having some of those positives. So yeah, a little bit more, I guess, about the place. So we happened to just be driving by. I think or my dad maybe was driving home, and he saw a for sale sign, just a, you know, yard sign, for sale by owner sign in the yard of this place. And I used to live at the place that they have out here, and I used to drive by this place, and I honestly always thought, like, wow, that is a super cool place. I'd love to buy that place someday. So it was kind of cool. And I was a realtor at the time. I was fairly new into real estate, and they had the sign, so we just called on the sign and thought, well, don't know, you know, I'm starting a new job. Could be difficult to get financing, but we're just going to go take a look at it. It's close to my parents, the kind of thing we've been looking for, you know. So I don't know if you remember that. We came,
Oh,
set
I
up the
completely
time.
remember. Well, because the ironic thing is that we had purchased a few houses in town before and sold them and looked at places outside of town, or tried to sell a house in town in time to purchase a house outside of town in time, and the timing never worked out.
And we were,
So then
we're
we
kind
decided,
of, the story's getting jumbled, but
I
we
know,
sold Panorama and we moved
into a rental because we wanted to be able to leap
on
when
D
we
Street.
saw, yes, which I loved. But I loved living on D Street right there, by the way. But we wanted to be able to jump when we found a spot outside of town because it wasn't happening timing wise before that.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously as in real estate I deal with a lot, is people trying to figure out the juggle of selling one place, buying another can be difficult. So we decided just to eliminate that issue by renting.
And
But the interesting was, we rented this house, but it was so much smaller than the house we had in Panorama,
But
we really loved the space and the layout.
I loved that layout.
And so when this place came up, you know, the house is a lot smaller, but we knew that we could live in a smaller home if the layout was right.
Yep.
So anyway, we met this couple here, really sweet people, and started walking through the house, and it was really kind of cut up, the layout, when we bought it. So, but we immediately could see, oh man, if we took out some walls, redid this, you could have great entertaining space and still this kind of 3-bed, 2-bath house. Anyway, we're walking through the house, and I knew, and bank financing might be tough. A new realtor, self-employed,
I usually
this
like
could be
to see
difficult.
a 2-year history,
Yeah.
something like that.
So, you know, but we were just walking through and just looking, and totally out of the blue, the guy who was selling it, Doug, he kind of turns to me and says, you know, I don't know what you guys are thinking or anything else, but we kind of talked about we'd maybe like to owner finance, which owner financing, basically it's similar to a bank loan. They're the ones who basically carry the note. So
Yep.
we make our payments every month through the title company to the owner. So the positive for them is they get some interest. You know, they didn't need a big lump sum of cash. They'd rather just have the income interest. So anyway, for them, there were some positives. So I was like, well, actually, that would be incredible because, you know, I'm starting real estate. It might be difficult to get a bank loan. So, you know, let's talk more. And so we were still just talking through it, but it was just one of those cool things where it was like, wow, you know, that would probably be the only way we could do it. And he really wanted to do it that way. So anyway, we decided to kind of take a leap of faith and jump at it and make an offer. And he at the time was trying to sell this. He had 65 acres here originally.
Mm-hmm.
He had bought it from, we mentioned on the first episode that this place was the home of actually the last 2 farmers in Latah County to farm with horses, exclusively with horses, which is so cool. So anyway, they had bought it. It was 65 acres. So he sold 10 acres off to a neighbor, had 55 acres here, and was kind of offering it at 25 and 30, kind of 2 different parcels, 25 with the house and 30. In order to afford it, we made an offer on it with 15 acres and got it, which was awesome. So we had this 15-acre piece, 1920 farmhouse.
Yep.
So this year
100 birthday.
is our 100-year, the house's 100-year birthday, which is pretty cool. Sears Craftsman farmhouse had been totally remodeled in the 70s,
Yeah.
which in some ways was a bit of a shame.
I don't know if the original, you know, it's hard to say what the original would have looked like because there wasn't an upstairs in the original house.
Yeah,
so in
that's
the
true.
70s, they had created that upstairs out of the attic space, which is great. You know, it was really teeny before that, if you imagine no upstairs, because upstairs it's 3-bed, 1-bath, laundry.
Yeah, because the whole house is about 1900 square feet.
Yeah.
So it would have been just a 1,000 square foot little house before that.
Mm-hmm. And the wood stove was plop in the middle, I think, right over there. Which makes complete sense if you're trying to heat a small space, and everything on a budget, and a farmer's lifestyle, you know, but
Yeah, so it kind of had shag carpet and, you know, narrow trim, hollow core doors, all that stuff. So we basically gutted the house, We moved, actually my parents have kind of a guest cabin on their property, so we moved in there. We're staying there while we remodeled this, because we had done it before, living in a remodel, and that's tough. That's really tough. So we decided to do it that way and kind of take our time, did a lot of it ourselves, but basically gutted, made it real open concept, all new wood floors, put in can lighting, paint everywhere, all new trim, solid core, kind of craftsman style doors. Still a lot of projects to do, but that was kind of what we did here in the house. So that's kind of where we are now. Well, since then we bought an additional 40 acres from the same guy. He still had it, was holding on to it, and we really wanted it to try to kind of stay together. So it's a 55 acre little farm out here. Most of it's leased to a farmer who farms pulse crops, peas, lentils, beans, and then wheat as well on it. So yeah, do you remember one of the first things we did though, as we were getting started, was putting in the garden?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
So what are some challenges that we faced with the garden?
Well, I think it's a big jump, one, because you have microclimates here, and so we're close to Moscow Mountain. We're in the middle of a valley, and so we actually are in a cold spot. We're in a cold pocket, and with that, I had an adjustment in terms of, well, we could get a late frost in June and an early frost in the fall. So dahlias got taken to a hit. We also are suddenly hitting, creatures that I have never run into before, because, well, you don't really have gophers in town, pocket gophers, which are devastating to the garden. I mean, you can have a crop of beets and they just go along and eat. So you rip up beet after beet and there's only half a beet. So dealing with that, plus deer.
Yeah.
And the deer can get in no matter what. You can look up stuff online and try all the things which we've tried, and it doesn't work. Besides a fence that's 6 feet tall, you are not keeping those deer out. And so they get in and they eat. They love tulip bulbs. They munched all my lilies, the tops of the lilies. So there was just a big, huge learning curve that first year. I figured the first year of gardening, it was get rid of the big pests. And then the second year, it was dealing with these new bugs we'd never realized before, and they're eating all the flower petals. So of course there's tons of challenges that way, and you definitely appreciate how much work goes into farming and gardening. If we were relying on our garden, to make it through winter, we would be dead. But
that's true. But it's great though to have that. Have that for the kids. I feel like that was one of the things that we talked about as another real positive, was growing up out here where the kids have some responsibilities. They have to learn how to go and gather eggs. So we didn't talk about chickens. We added chickens,
and it built a chicken coop. Started that in the garage. Moved the chicken coop outside of the garage, and ordered the chicks. Well, the first batch we picked up at North 40 and then brought them up, and they're so cute, and then they go through the teenage years and they look like little dinosaurs.
A little scraggly.
And of course they are smelly and stinky, and there's just all the lessons learned cleaning out the coop. I've got a great picture of Asa cleaning the coop out. But and then of course the fun of the fresh eggs and constantly checking every single day, because they don't start laying until about 5 months after they've been a chick, so they have to get up to about 5 months. They need X number of hours of daylight in order to lay. And so you're checking constantly, and it was so exciting to get the first eggs. The first one's teeny tiny.
And once you have farm fresh eggs,
oh man, it's hard to go back.
You can't. Our kids are kind of become egg snobs.
Yeah, they are.
They.
And right now we've had to buy eggs because it's the middle of winter. Our flock took a beating this past fall from coyotes and hawks and whatnot. So we are down to 3 chickens. And but they're brave and bold chickens.
Yeah, so I feel like so much of it, it's just the way life is, right? There's the pros and cons, the ups and downs. It's the amazing pros of fresh eggs, but all the work that goes along with it, and
how much those eggs probably really cost.
The death you have to experience of chickens and pets.
We've
lost cats.
We've lost cats. That was devastating. We've lost dogs, and that's been horrible. But the chickens, they are mean to each other. There's a lot of lessons.
But we also I feel like we really kind of dove head first too. I mean, because we had the chickens, and not long after the chickens, we added the sheep.
Oh yeah, we had sheep. Yep,
Yeah.
we've done sheep for a couple of seasons.
So the first year, we bought sheep from the University of Idaho,
Yep.
right?
And those sheep did not meet the picture of what our poor little sweet daughter was hoping for. Because she had wanted lambs, right? You think lamb, you think small and woolly, and I can pet them. And then
that's what we told her. We were getting lambs, which was the case. But honestly,
lambs,
I thought too that they would be these
small,
like little wobbly legged lambs, right?
They were these off.
But by the time we picked them up, they were like full on sheep. So they're less than a year old, obviously. So they're still lambs technically. But these were like big sheep. Pretty skittish at first. Finally, they warmed up to us after a while. But
the sheep are hilarious. They are so dumb, and they are so hilariously funny because they are a pack animal and they just go together wherever they are. And the kids, of course, named them, which is super fun, you know. But
yeah, so we were doing, rather than like building a flock, we were doing feeder lambs basically. So we were picking them up after they were weaned and a little bit bigger, and then feeding them out on pasture. So you've got a lot of grass out here, taking advantage of that.
And then if you are on rural property, thinking through your tax stuff, that was grazing land is actually one of the best property tax things.
Yeah, it's true. It helps with your property tax exemptions
and so that was a reason to have.
But it was and the lamb. I mean, lamb's expensive and it's wonderful. I mean, it's probably my favorite meat.
It's really and
so we had a lot of lamb. But basically, we'd feed them out on the grass and then have them butchered in the fall. And,
yeah.
Have lamb meat and some to share, some to sell, and so that was a really cool experience. Did that a few times.
Well, the second year,
and it was easy. I mean, it was really
surprisingly ezy. The second year, I picked him up in the back of the Suburban.
Okay.
You were out fishing.
Didn't one of them poop in?
But we had a really spunky. Sophie's really spunky. She and Asa were in the back with these little lambs, holding them because it was just out here close by at a neighbor's that we were picking them up. And so we load the sheep in the back of the car. I put a huge cardboard flower box, which are really big boxes back there. So the sheep are back there, Asa and Sophie are back there, and we're driving them back home. And then we get home and we're unloading, and of course one of the sheep had pooped, maybe both. And Sophie was like, "Well, it got poop in my shoe," but she hadn't complained at all. She's just dumping out the sheep poop. And then of course we bring them over to let them in the pasture, but I don't know what happened here. But instead of letting them off in the pasture, somehow we took them off of their leads before we got there. So then, no, we let them go without removing the leads. So of course we don't want them to get tangled on anything. So now we're trying to chase down the sheep. Mike's not here. The kids and I are out there, and we have a lot of stories where
was I elk hunting?
You were hunting or fishing? It might have been fishing.
It was spring. Yeah.
I think it was fishing.
Oh my goodness.
So, but they were cute, and those had been bottle-fed sheep, so they had been runts, and so they were much more friendly with humans and fit the bill more for what our little girl was looking for.
And speaking of the ups and downs, that was one of the hardest days of my life. Was having to take those sheep to the butcher. Oh man, yeah, really tough.
Yeah.
But that's life on the farm, and I think those are some good lessons that the kids get to learn, and I get to learn too. And so, yeah, I mean, if that's something that you're interested in kind of livestock and getting into it, sheep is a great way to get started.
It was really
And so that's one of the definite positives. So we were kind of doing the remodel, jumped into the kind of small farm life, and it was some of the other things that we had to
growing sheep,
deal
chickens,
with.
Cats, lots of death. There was the kind of the year of death on the farm. Where
we don't need to go into that too much,
tragic.
but yeah, lost some animals and that's tough. But now we were talking about this when we got started. It's full on winter, and it's really fun. I think you get to feel the seasons. I think a little more acutely when you're living out here.
Well, and I don't know if it's part of just being older versus being a kid when I was growing up in town. But I do feel like we've got so much open expanse of the sky out here that you appreciate the sunsets every single night. And we get an amazing amount of sunsets. It can be cloudy all day, and then it can clear up right before the sun goes down, and we get hit with a gorgeous sky. So I think that's something I've learned to appreciate way more out here.
The views and the sunsets, and I feel like you don't have the distraction because oftentimes you can see the beautiful sky in town, and there are certainly homes in town that are up high and have views where you can see over towards Pullman and the sunsets, of course. But yeah, I think it's that big sky here, and seeing the mountain. We live just south of Moscow Mountain, and it's like right there. And seeing the sun reflect off the mountain in different seasons, and in the snow, it can just glow orange, all that kind of thing. And speaking of snow, I think one of the things that, you have to have, you mentioned we were plowing, we're getting hammered today with snow, and you have to have that equipment for plowing, for dealing with moving it out, snow, whether it's a snow plow. So, but people in real estate, I think a lot of times people can get really excited about moving out of town, and they're budgeting a bunch of stuff, but they're not necessarily budgeting for that equipment.
Right.
And we've got a tractor now that's been super helpful, from a big brush hog mower to mow more property, the 5-foot rototiller for putting in the garden, and the bucket for moving snow. Even that was super effective, so we just got a side-by-side for both showing property as well as snow removal and stuff. But you just have to factor that in, and to have the space for all those tools or toys, depending.
And I think the other thing, I don't like to spend money on, do we really need to spend money on that boot or on that shovel? And then it breaks partway through. And so it actually makes complete sense. Like, nope, we're going to be out here. We want to enjoy it. We should get the nice boots for the kids.
Get the gear.
Get the right kind of shovel, the one that's going to do a good job and not break and frustrate you, or that could be the shovel for the garden, or the right equipment to weed, so you're not just super frustrated.
Well, and we should do some future podcasts about the gear necessary to live out.
And
live here or recreate all the different places we're going to be talking about on the podcast,
Which makes makes it way more enjoyable.
Oh, yeah.
But it does require budgeting for that kind of stuff, or planning, or realizing, that it's worth that investment to get whatever piece of equipment it might be.
Yeah. Well, we should probably wrap it up pretty quick, but when you mentioned budget, it reminded me of we've just spent a bunch of money on our well. So water is a whole, you really get an appreciation for water when you're living on a well. And so that's a podcast in itself.
We have been battling
since
July 4th,
2018. Yeah, finally got a great system in place. So, but that's a whole other podcast for us to follow up on. But
and that one's been a really good learning experience. Yeah. All of this is good learning experience.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're trying to do here is learn and then share through the podcast. So, hope you all enjoyed this second episode, and looking forward to some interviews coming up.
This week, we're doing our first interview.
So stay tuned for that, and thanks for joining us and bearing with us on the Kestrel Country Podcast.
Thanks for joining us. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next week.